Okay, let's keep rocking. We're going to move right through to the founder of the Mindshift Foundation, Susan Lomas. She's going to talk to us about going from silence to safety. And what this means, part of what this means, is that we're creating an effective speak up culture. So, Susan is a geologist by background. She's got 30 years in Canada's mining industry. She is a veteran and she has seen a lot of things. She's navigated remote exploration camps. She's been through one or two volatile commodity cycles. She knows about this chaos of the market thing. And also looking at how boardroom decisions have been responding over the years to these cycles of boom or bust, which happen in the mining industry, right? And everything in between. So she's got actually a total of 38 years in mining and exploration. Susan is going to share some lessons on the greatest threat to our industry. And in her opinion, it is not geological or financial, it's safety. Okay, so her message really does harmonize with the other speakers we've been hearing from. And she sent one tweet back in the day, back when it was still called Twitter. She sent one hashtag Me Too Mining tweet, and that started a movement. And the psychological safety is really the key to building a resilient and high performing workplace. So, welcome, Susan. Thank you so much for being with us. Would love to hear your perspective, gosh, around the multiple decades of experience that you have. How have you seen the conversations around safety evolving over those 38 years that you've put in and around the industry?
Well, it's really incredible listening to the speakers today and the conversation that's happening here versus when I started back in 1987 at a mine underground right out of university. And yeah, I learned very early you put that armor on every day before you go to work and you live behind it in this very focused, okay, it's just about the work, it's just about the work, all this other stuff happening, we don't talk about it, we don't deal with it, we just keep moving forward. And as an early woman within the mining industry with working underground, it was all these expectations around me. Don't be a bitch, don't be too mommy-ish, don't be and of course you're dealing with a plethora of different personalities around you, so you kind of turn into this chameleon and reading what it is that you need to be in that very specific environment or talking to that very specific person that you're dealing with. So it was just really easy to slip into all these different modes, hide behind that armor. And when something happened, I sort of always talk about this imaginary backpack, because as geologists, that's what we do. We walk around with backpacks and we throw rocks and samples in them, but just throwing those incidents behind us so we could just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And it really has changed from then to now, with a generational change, a generational shift, a couple of times probably within my last almost 40 years in mining. And watching that evolve, watching that change in conversation, watching those different people coming in with different ways of looking at things. That old guard of, no, we will just focus on production and nothing else matters, and every penny that you're taking out of the price of the commodity that you're mining needs to be very justified and very strictly used technically or mechanically. um,
Mm.
yeah, there was no talk about people, or we did have a fatality on site when I was working in an exploration camp, and there was nothing. There was no care for anybody there. We kind of dealt with the situation on our own in our own way, and then we were expected to be back there walking through the bush where this person had been killed by a bear, and walking through the bush 2 weeks later like nothing even happened. And so
Wow.
that was really a wake-up call for me, and an awareness of how they would deal with that today versus how they dealt with that in the early 1990s. And so there has been a change, and in some ways things haven't changed.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm still kind of stunned from that bear example. I can only imagine how that must have felt. And like you said, it just goes in the backpack, right? We deal with it one way or another.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a huge boulder that kind of got pushed
yeah.
back over time.
My gosh. Well, I really love everything that you're sharing. And what I hear is that we are making progress. It is moving in the right direction. Maybe culturally we're shifting a little bit to be able to talk about these things and to recognize that, like machines, we do need certain things to be maintained. You know, human connection is part of what allows us to show up as our best and to perform properly. So maybe we're making some good steps in the right direction. You know, your organization, Mindshift, runs bystander intervention training, as you know, and I'm really curious to hear some of the impact that those trainings, that those interventions have had on some of your clients. What are some of the most notable positive examples?
It's for me when we give the course, there's that preliminary part where we talk about the numbers. We use statistics from the Rio Tinto report and the Goldfields report just to show.
Yeah.
We didn't have numbers when we first started this. So it's so incredible to have numbers that we can show. 30% of women within those organizations reported experience of sexual harassment and 7% of men. And I knew intuitively from the stories I was hearing from men when we first started our organization that they were experiencing incredible levels of sexual harassment within
Mm-hmm.
their work environments. And when those reports came out, and I worked through those numbers because 40, 50,000 employees, 80% male dominated, that 30% of women is 2,700 women. That 7%, excuse me, of men is 2,500 men. It's the same amount
Yeah.
of people that are experiencing sexual harassment, but we're not inviting men to the surveys. Or, there was that
Mm,
inquiry in Western Australia of sexual harassment of women in fly in, fly out camps. And it was an incredible inquiry. But what if they had included men in all of the
mm,
surveys that they did around it, in all of the discussions, in all of the submissions? Men obviously wouldn't have felt welcome to put a submission in, and I wish that they had brought in that inquiry that they
mm,
had, because it was an incredible read of all their inputs. So I gave a talk, and in one of the first talks I actually used those numbers. At the end of it, a gentleman stood up and he was very emotional, and it was incredible to hear him say, "Thank you for giving that voice to me, having had an experience like that and never being invited to share it or to talk about it in any way." And it was, thank you for standing up and saying that and being able to have that space. And that's what Mindshift and our Digger course is all about. Because once we've gone through those numbers and what bystander intervention is and what to do, we go into breakout rooms and we talk about scenarios. We talk about real world scenarios that have happened in mining from people I've heard, that have happened to me, that have happened to other people within Mindshift. And so it connects with people, and they have conversations that they've never had before with their coworkers or within the group, the small group that they're in. If it's an open one, they may not actually work together. People start sharing their stories. I've had a president of a drilling company suddenly start, again, getting very emotional because we talk about bullying and that
mm.
culture within mining. 50% of workers have been bullied, report being bullied in their at their workplace. And he talks about that. He talked about that culture, and again, you could see he was very emotional because he'd never had that opportunity to share his feelings on being bullied at work. So it's those conversations, or people coming up and sharing their stories because they've never had. I think one last story I had is that I gave a talk. It was really one of the first talks I gave. I was absolutely terrified, and it was 800 people. And someone came up to me many years later. I didn't even know, because I was so lost in my own terror afterwards. What have I done to my career? Of that,
Mm.
she walked into the women's washroom and there were women crying in there because nobody had ever talked about their lived experience before in such a public way that they completely connected with what I was sharing with them, and what I was talking about that had never been really talked about openly in a personal way. You know, statistics and numbers are easy to disassociate from,
Mm.
but stories everybody connects with.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine the what you spoke about there. You sort of glossed over it, but I'd love for you to unpack a little more the process that you went through to decide to break your silence, to decide to put down your own backpack and say, I'm going to be part of the solution here. This ends with me, or I'm going to try to change this best I can. And that requires kind of speaking up. You're breaking some taboos there, right? Like you talked earlier about the pressure to conform and to be nice and to get along with everyone and to be what everybody needs, right? That chameleon pressure that women in many male dominated industries experience. And here you are now doing the opposite. You're challenging things, you're changing the conversation, you're calling out something that everybody's been putting up with silently. Talk to us about your personal journey and what did you go through to get over your own objections to yourself about whether this was a good idea?
Well, my personal journey started through my whole really life, right? Dealing with traumas, dealing with things, dissociating, not having really good
Mm,
resilience, not having very good coping mechanisms, and having defense mechanisms that were too strong. So in 2014, I actually woke up one morning just in the throes of PTSD, just
mm,
lost all ability to hold myself together anymore. The armor flew off of me. I was raw. I was exposed. It was a really horrible experience, and it took me a while to recognize what was going on, but not having a name for it, and
yeah,
seeking out a therapist and saying, "I'm in real trouble here. I'm not this armored person anymore, and I don't know how to do this." And it was
yeah,
really that started in 2014. So it was like a 3-4 year journey of working through PTSD, and working through and rebuilding healthy defense mechanisms, and healthy
yes, yes,
of interacting and having honesty within myself, and facing things that really is unpacking that backpack, and taking out each piece and really looking at it, and accepting it. So it really created a different person for me.
mm-hmm.
And what my therapist called post-traumatic recovery, was, now I'm seeing everybody with this. I can recognize it in somebody,
Yeah,
that they're struggling with trauma, that they're not being their authentic selves, and just, again, like, just stifled by this stillness within the industry. This Me Too mining was happening, but nobody, not Me Too mining, but the Me Too movement
me
was
too. Yeah,
happening,
broadly.
and it wasn't happening in mining. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
safe. Women didn't feel safe to speak up. A lot of them, some did, to say
Right.
that. And so it was sitting there. And as the seed started sort of in the mid 2017 of, I gotta do something about this. We need to start this conversation. And then sitting there in January of 2018, looking at Twitter and typing out that hashtag. And I'm so upset with myself that I didn't get a screen capture of that original one. And with the whole thing with Twitter to X, we closed
Mm-hmm.
the account, so we can't get it back. But it was about, it's time to start the conversation, I think, was sort of the bold headline. And it was, we need to talk about sexual harassment and sexual assault in the mining industry. And I looked at it for so long. I literally sat there for like 10-15 minutes, and then I just sort of looked away and I hit send, because I really was very afraid. I had lost 30 years of a mining career, and I had just chucked it away. And it started this conversation. I got to do CBC radio, I got to do CBC News, I got to speak at conferences. So, as terrifying as it was for me to step out and do that,
Yes.
I could not do it.
Yes.
right? It just happened, and it's been an evolution through it. And it's been an incredible journey to hear people coming up and sharing their stories with me.
Susan, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but on behalf of everyone in the mining industry, I want to thank you for hitting send on that tweet and for deciding that your own personal cost was worth the benefit and the impact that it could create. It sounded like you had that moment of, okay, if not me, then who? Who's going to do this if I'm not going to do it? And you stepped up and you started something, as you've said, that has become a movement. And now that is rippling out across so many businesses, helping so many people in small, indirect, maybe unmeasurable ways, but so important. And I would say for anyone who's on the call here today who feels drawn to do something about these systemic issues that we know are happening, right? We know that these things, maybe we decide, oh, I can't do anything about it. Going by Susan's example, you most certainly can. At very minimum, you can connect with Susan and her Mindshift organization to see what bystander intervention training could look like. This is a very proven methodology, proven to inoculate people, stop the harm from happening. Would you say, Susan, it's a first step? It's a good, maybe a first aid measure for the safety of your culture. And then there are many other actions that you can take over time. You just have to get started, right? It just starts with one conversation, one commitment, one engagement, and you build from there.
Yeah, just one last quick point, and it was so listening to those stories and them ending with, I didn't know what to do. What should I have done? And not having an answer for that in the beginning when we first started, and then finding bystander intervention and really adapting it for the mining industry, and giving practical solutions to, we do sort of within companies, but we also do open cast through Eventbrite, sessions for anybody that wants to come in and learn these skills, because they're not intuitive. They're not taught to you how to speak up. Even, and when it's not safe to speak up, what are your other options? Bystander intervention is just not standing up and saying that's not okay. There's so many other things that you can do if you're not safe, or if that's not within you at that moment. The most important thing you can do is go talk to the person that something just happened to. That's the most impactful thing a bystander can do, because it starts to dissipate all of the impact that they're feeling from what just happened to them, and guide them toward help, or their family or their friends, so they can reconnect back to something that they're safe and that they know. That's bystander intervention, and it's just really lovely practical solutions and actions and strategies that you can use that we don't know intuitively.
Yeah, incredible. Just to have that awareness and have those tools ready. If we ever need them, right, then we're prepared to either speak up in the moment, or, as you said, take some other action after the fact to help better the situation, one conversation at a time. There's a great comment in the chat I just want to quickly draw attention to. Thank you so much, Chrissy. One of your team members shared here. One of our Mindshift clients shared with us, we have hosted annual digger workshops each spring to keep safety top of mind and to onboard new staff. Just like CPR training, we build muscle memory for psychological safety. Absolutely love that. So goes back to the point that Cheryl made earlier, right, about consistency and how this can become part of the routine, part of the habits, part of the culture. And it's something we're not taught. We probably don't have it automatically. So appreciate you kind of giving us the big picture, as well as some really specific next steps that we can take in order to be part of the solution here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you also to everybody here that's listening. I think this is how we build community. This is how we build communications around these topics.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan.